The horizon bled with the last rays of daylight as the train whistled its arrival into Carson City, Nevada Territory, 1868. The locomotive's black smoke billowed against the crimson sky, steel wheels screeching against the rails as it shuddered to a halt at the small wooden platform. Willow Anderson clutched her worn leather valise with trembling hands. She had traveled for 6 days from Philadelphia, each mile taking her further from the life she'd known and closer to a future with a stranger. At 22, she had answered an advertisement in the matrimonial news, exchanging letters with a cattle rancher named Zachariah Donovan for 4 months before agreeing to become his bride. But now, as she stood to gather her belongings, the enormity of what she'd done crashed over her. She was alone, 3,000 miles from home, about to marry a man she'd never met. The conductor called the stop, and Willow forced herself to move, stepping carefully down onto the platform. The hot Nevada air hit her like a physical force after the relative coolness of the train car. Her eyes stung with tears that she couldn't contain. They slid down her cheeks as she glanced frantically around the platform, searching for the man who had described himself as tall with broad shoulders and a scar above his right eye. There were several men waiting, but none approached her. As passengers disembarked around her, their happy reunions with waiting family only heightened Willow's isolation. Her throat tightened with panic. Had he changed his mind? Was this all some cruel joke? A dust cloud appeared in the distance, growing larger as a horse and rider approached at a gallop. The animal, a magnificent chestnut stallion, came to a sliding stop at the edge of the platform. The rider dismounted in one fluid motion, removing his hat to reveal dark hair streaked with sun-bleached strands. "Miss Anderson?" His voice was deep, slightly breathless as he approached her. Willow could only nod, tears still streaming down her face. He was indeed tall, with shoulders that strained against his cotton shirt, and there was the thin white scar above his right eye. His face was tanned from the sun, with a strong jaw covered in a day's worth of stubble. Zachariah Donovan took in the sight of the crying woman before him, her delicate features framed by honey blonde hair that had escaped its pins during the journey. She looked exhausted and terrified, clutching her valise like a shield. His expression softened immediately. "I apologize for being late," he said, stepping closer. "One of my horses threw a shoe on the way to town." He hesitated, then reached out slowly to take her valise. "You're safe," he assured her gently. "You're home. You're mine to protect now." Willow's tears fell harder at his words, though she couldn't have explained why. Relief, perhaps, or the tenderness in his voice when she had expected coldness from a hardened frontiersman. "I thought perhaps you weren't coming," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I gave my word," he replied simply. "I wouldn't leave you stranded." He offered his handkerchief, which she took gratefully to dab at her eyes. "Are you hungry? Thirsty? We have about an hour's ride to the ranch." Willow nodded. A drink would be welcome. The train was dusty. Zachariah smiled, the expression transforming his serious face. "Let's get you settled, then. My wagon is just down the street." As they walked from the platform, Willow became aware of curious glances from townsfolk. A mail-order bride wasn't unusual in these parts, but she knew her tear-stained face and Eastern clothes marked her as an outsider. "Don't mind them," Zachariah said quietly, sensing her discomfort. "Carson City folk are good people, just not used to seeing new faces, especially ones as pretty as yours." Willow felt her cheeks warm at the unexpected compliment. The wagon was simple but sturdy, with a bench seat wide enough for two and a covered back that Zachariah explained held supplies from town. He helped her climb up, his hands strong and sure at her waist, then secured her valise in the back. At a small cafe near the station, he bought her a cup of coffee and a sandwich, insisting she eat before they began the journey to his ranch. He was quiet as she ate, not pressing her with questions, though his eyes, a striking shade of green that reminded her of the forest back home, watched her with undisguised curiosity. "I've prepared a room for you," he said as they climbed back into the wagon. "It was my mother's before she passed. I've aired it out and put fresh linens on the bed." "That's very thoughtful," Willow replied, touched by the consideration. "Your letters didn't mention your mother. She died 3 years ago. My father's been gone longer, 10 years now. It's just been me at the Diamond D since then." The Diamond D, his ranch, her new home. The reality of her situation settled over her again like a heavy blanket. "We'll be married by Reverend Thornton on Sunday, if that suits you," Zachariah continued, his tone businesslike. "That gives you 3 days to rest from your journey and decide if you want to go through with this." Willow turned to him in surprise. "You're giving me a choice?" His expression was solemn as he snapped the reins to start the horses moving. "I won't hold you to anything against your will. The West is hard country, Miss Anderson. I won't lie to you about that. If you find it or me not to your liking, I'll see that you get safely back east." The sincerity in his voice loosened some of the tightness in Willow's chest. "Thank you," she said softly, "but I intend to honor our arrangement." As the wagon rolled out of town, the vastness of the landscape took Willow's breath away. The desert stretched endlessly, framed by distant mountains that glowed purple in the fading light. It was nothing like the crowded streets and neat gardens of Philadelphia. Here, nature ruled unchallenged, beautiful and terrifying in its immensity. "It's overwhelming at first," Zachariah said, noticing her wide-eyed gaze. "But you'll grow to love it." "Do you?" she asked. "Love it, I mean." He considered this for a moment. "I was born here. Don't know anything different. But yes, I suppose I do love it. There's a freedom here you won't find anywhere else." They fell into silence as darkness descended fully, the only sounds the creak of the wagon wheels and the steady clip-clop of the horses' hooves. Stars appeared overhead, more than Willow had ever seen, so bright and numerous they seemed close enough to touch. "Tell me about your family," Zachariah said eventually. "Your letters mentioned a father and sisters, but little else." Willow's hands tightened in her lap. "My father was a doctor. He died last winter of influenza, though he fought it bravely. My sisters married years ago and moved west themselves, one to Chicago, the other to St. Louis. With father gone, there was nothing keeping me in Philadelphia." She didn't mention the mounting debts her father had left, or how their fine home had been sold to pay them, leaving her with few options. Answering Zachariah's advertisement had been an act of desperation as much as courage. "I'm sorry about your father," he said, genuine sympathy in his voice. "Thank you. What of your parents? You said they've passed, but what were they like?" Zachariah's profile was strong against the starlit sky. "My father came out here during the gold rush of '49. Found enough gold to buy land, but not enough to make him rich. He met my mother in Virginia City. She was a schoolteacher from Boston. Everyone said she was too refined for a rough man like him, but they were happy together." His voice held a wistfulness that tugged at Willow's heart. "They sound wonderful." "They were." He glanced at her. "My mother would have liked you." The compliment warmed Willow more than she expected. They continued on in companionable silence, the gentle rocking of the wagon nearly lulling her to sleep despite her nervous anticipation of what awaited her. Just as Willow thought she couldn't stay awake another minute, Zachariah pointed ahead. "There it is, the Diamond D." She peered into the darkness. In the distance, she could make out the glow of lamplight. As they drew closer, the outline of a substantial 2-story house emerged, with several smaller buildings nearby, a barn, bunkhouse, and what appeared to be a cookhouse. "It's larger than I expected," she admitted, impressed despite her exhaustion. "My father had big dreams," Zachariah explained. "Built the house for a family of 6, though my mother only ever had me." There was a note of old sadness in his voice that he quickly masked. "Come, you must be dead on your feet." He helped her down from the wagon, his touch careful but not lingering. A young boy emerged from the shadows to take the horses. "Evening, Mr. Donovan," the boy said, his curious gaze fixed on Willow. "Evening, Tommy. This is Miss Anderson. She'll be staying with us now." Tommy ducked his head respectfully. "Madam, Tommy's father is my foreman," Zachariah explained as he led Willow to the house. "The boy helps with the horses." The house was simply but comfortably furnished, with solid wooden pieces that spoke of quality rather than fashion. A fire burned in the large stone hearth of the main room, casting a welcoming glow. "This is lovely," Willow said sincerely, taking in the room. A bookshelf caught her eye, filled with more volumes than she would have expected in a ranch house. "My mother's collection," Zachariah said, following her gaze. She loved to read. "You're welcome to any of them." He showed her upstairs to a large bedroom. True to his word, the bed was made up with fresh linens, and a vase of wildflowers sat on the dresser. The thoughtfulness of the gesture brought unexpected tears to Willow's eyes. "The washroom is down the hall," he said, placing her valise by the bed. "There's hot water if you'd like to wash before retiring." "Thank you," she managed, suddenly overwhelmed by exhaustion and emotion. Zachariah paused at the door. "Sleep as late as you need tomorrow. You're safe here, Willow." It was the first time he'd used her given name, and it sounded right in his deep voice. "Good night." "Good night, Zachariah," she replied softly. When he'd gone, Willow sank onto the edge of the bed. Everything had happened so quickly: the decision to leave Philadelphia, the long journey, and now this strange house with this stranger who was to be her husband. Yet something in Zachariah's steady gaze and quiet strength reassured her. He was not what she had expected, this solemn cowboy with gentle hands and thoughtful words. She was too tired to unpack fully, managing only to change into her nightdress before crawling beneath the covers. Despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded her at first, her mind racing with thoughts of what the future might hold. But gradually, the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch, the distant lowing of cattle, the soft hoot of an owl, the creak of the house settling lulled her into a deep, dreamless sleep. Willow woke to sunlight streaming through curtains she'd forgotten to close. For a moment, she was disoriented, the unfamiliar room confusing her sleep-addled mind. Then memory rushed back: the train, Zachariah, the ranch, her new life. She rose and went to the window. The view took her breath away. The ranch spread out before her, a collection of buildings surrounded by corrals, and, beyond them, open range that stretched to distant mountains. Men on horseback moved among a herd of cattle, their shouts carried faintly on the morning breeze. After washing and dressing in one of her plainest dresses, still far too formal for ranch life, she realized Willow made her way downstairs. She followed the smell of coffee to the kitchen at the back of the house, where she found a plump, middle-aged woman kneading dough at a large table. The woman looked up and smiled broadly. "Well, there you are. I was beginning to think you'd sleep the day away, though Zach said to let you rest as long as you needed." She wiped her hands on her apron. "I'm Margaret Jenkins, but everyone calls me Maggie. My husband, Frank, is Mr. Donovan's foreman. I'm Willow Anderson. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Jenkins." "Maggie, please. Mrs. Jenkins makes me sound ancient." She gestured to a chair. "Sit down, and I'll fix you something to eat. You're thin as a rail." Willow obeyed, amused by Maggie's motherly manner. "Do you cook for the ranch?" "Just for the house. The Cowboys have their own cook at the bunkhouse, thank the Lord. Feeding 20 hungry men would be more than I could manage." She placed a cup of coffee in front of Willow. "Zach said you came all the way from Philadelphia. That's quite a journey for a young lady." "It was," Willow agreed, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. Is Mr. Donovan around?" "He rode out at dawn with the men. There's a section of fence down on the North Range." Maggie placed a plate of eggs and biscuits before her. "He said to tell you he'd be back for supper and to make yourself at home." As Willow ate, Maggie chattered, filling her in on the workings of the ranch and the people who lived there. The Diamond D employed 15 full-time cowboys, with more hired during the busy seasons. Besides Maggie and Frank, there was also Tommy, their son, and an older man named Hank who served as both handyman and blacksmith. "Zach runs a tight operation," Maggie said proudly. "The Diamond D is one of the most successful ranches in the territory. Your husband-to-be is quite the businessman." Willow felt her cheeks warm at the phrase, husband-to-be. "Has he always lived here?" she asked. "Since he was born. He went away to school in San Francisco for a few years. His mother insisted on that, but he came right back afterward. This land is in his blood." Maggie studied her. "It'll take some getting used to for a city girl like you, but you seem like you've got spirit." "I hope so," Willow murmured, suddenly uncertain. What did she know about ranch life? About being a wife? About Zachariah himself? After breakfast, Maggie gave her a tour of the house. It was larger than it had appeared the night before, with 4 bedrooms upstairs, a study, dining room, and a comfortable parlor downstairs. Everything was neat but simple, practical rather than fashionable. Zach's mother had finer tastes, Maggie explained, noticing Willow's interest in a delicate china cabinet in the dining room. She brought a lot of things from back east. After she died, Zach didn't change anything, just left it all as she had it. That must have been difficult for him, losing both parents. It was. He's a quiet one. Keeps things close to his chest, but anyone with eyes could see how it pained him. Maggie's expression grew serious. That's why folks around here were so pleased when he started writing to you. This house needs a woman's touch again. It needs children's laughter. The frankness made Willow blush, but she appreciated Maggie's honesty. I'll do my best, she promised, though uncertainty gnawed at her. Would she be enough for this man and this place? Later, as afternoon stretched toward evening, Willow sat on the wide front porch with a book from Zachariah's mother's collection. But her attention kept wandering to the horizon, watching for Zachariah's return. The landscape was so different from the crowded streets of Philadelphia, vast and open, with a beauty that was stark rather than cultivated. The sound of hoofbeats drew her attention. Zachariah approached on the chestnut stallion she'd seen yesterday, riding with an easy confidence that spoke of a lifetime in the saddle. He saw her on the porch and raised a hand in greeting. He dismounted at the hitching post, removing his hat and running a hand through his hair before coming up the steps. His skin was dusty, his clothes showing the effects of a day's hard work. "You're looking better today," he said by way of greeting. "Did you sleep well?" "Very well, thank you. Your home is lovely." He smiled slightly. "It's far from the comforts you're used to, I'm sure." "Different," she agreed, "but not unpleasantly so." He nodded, seeming pleased. "I need to wash up before supper. Would you like to walk with me afterward? I could show you more of the ranch." "I'd like that very much." Supper was a simple but hearty affair: roast beef, potatoes, and fresh bread that Maggie had baked that morning. Zachariah ate with the focused efficiency of a man accustomed to seeing food as fuel rather than pleasure, though he complimented Maggie's cooking with genuine appreciation. Afterward, true to his word, he invited Willow outside. The evening was cooler, the harsh heat of the day giving way to a gentle warmth. Zachariah led her past the barn and corrals, pointing out the various buildings and explaining their purposes. "How much land do you have?" Willow asked, trying to comprehend the scale of the operation. "About 20,000 acres. Most of it grazing land for the cattle." The number staggered her. "That's enormous." "Not by some standards. There are ranches in Texas 10 times this size. But it's enough for what I need." He glanced at her. "What I want to show you is just up ahead." They crested a small rise, and Willow gasped. Below them stretched a small lake, its surface reflecting the colors of the sunset like a mirror. Cottonwood trees clustered along its shore, their leaves rustling in the gentle breeze. "It's beautiful," she breathed. "My father built the house here because of this view. My mother used to say it was like having a painting that changed with the seasons." There was a wistfulness in his voice that touched Willow's heart. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the light change on the water. "I know this is all very strange for you," Zachariah said finally. "Coming to a place you've never seen, to marry a man you've never met." "It is," she admitted. "But I made my choice when I answered your advertisement." He turned to face her fully, his expression serious. "Why did you? Answer it, I mean." Willow considered evading the question, giving some platitude about seeking adventure or a new beginning. But something in his direct gaze compelled honesty. "My father left debts when he died. Our house, his practice, everything had to be sold. I had nowhere to go, no means to support myself except as a governess or companion, and those positions." She trailed off, remembering the humiliating interviews she'd endured, the barely concealed contempt of former friends. "They weren't suitable," Zachariah finished for her. She nodded. "Your letter stood out. You were honest about what life here would be like, but also kind. You didn't make grand promises. It seemed real." "I'm not a man for pretty words," he said, almost apologetically. "But I meant what I wrote. I can offer you security, respect, and a good home. In time, perhaps more." The simple statement, delivered without flourish, moved Willow more than any grand declaration might have. That's all anyone could ask for. As they walked back to the house, Zachariah maintained a respectful distance, but Willow was increasingly aware of his height, the breadth of his shoulders, the careful way he moderated his stride to match hers. He was not handsome in the conventional way of the men she'd known in Philadelphia, but there was something compelling about his features, a quiet strength that drew the eye. The next day passed in a similar fashion, with Zachariah working from dawn until dusk while Willow explored the house and its surroundings, getting to know Maggie better and beginning to understand the rhythm of ranch life. In the evening, they again walked together, this time to see the horses in the corral. "I thought you might like to choose one for yourself," Zachariah said, surprising her. "Every rancher's wife needs a good horse." "I've never ridden," Willow confessed, eyeing the large animals nervously. "Never?" He seemed genuinely shocked. "Well, we'll have to remedy that. I'll teach you. Start you on something gentle." He pointed out a pretty bay mare with a white blaze. "That's Daisy. She's sweet-tempered and patient. Good for a beginner." Willow approached the fence cautiously. The mare ambled over, stretching her neck to investigate this new person. After a moment's hesitation, Willow reached out to stroke the velvety nose. "She likes you," Zachariah observed, a smile tugging at his lips. "She's lovely," Willow said, surprised by the immediate connection she felt with the animal. "She's yours, then. We'll start your lessons after the wedding, if you'd like." The casual mention of the wedding sent a flutter through Willow's stomach. It was the day after tomorrow. So soon, yet somehow it felt right. These 2 days had shown her more of Zachariah's character than months of letters could have done. His quiet competence, his consideration, the respect with which he treated everyone from Maggie to the youngest cowboy all painted a picture of a good man. That night, lying in bed, Willow thought about what it would mean to be Mrs. Donovan. She would no longer be a guest in this house, but its mistress. And Zachariah would no longer be her host, but her husband, with all that entailed. The thought brought heat to her cheeks, but not fear. There was something about him that inspired trust, a steadiness that made her feel secure rather than apprehensive. Sunday dawned clear and bright. Maggie helped Willow dress in her best gown, a pale blue silk that had been her mother's. It was slightly outdated by Philadelphia standards, but would do nicely for a frontier wedding. "You look beautiful," Maggie declared, securing the last hairpin. "Zach won't know what hit him." They rode to town in the wagon, Zachariah looking unfamiliar and handsome in a dark suit. He'd shaved carefully, and his hair was neatly combed. When he'd first seen Willow in her wedding dress, he'd stopped short, his expression a mixture of admiration and something deeper that had made her heart beat faster. The church in Carson City was small but well-maintained, its white clapboard exterior gleaming in the morning sun. Inside, Willow was surprised to see several people already seated, the ranch hands, including Frank Jenkins and young Tommy, as well as what appeared to be townspeople. "Word gets around fast in a small town," Zachariah explained, noting her surprise. "Everyone's been curious about my bride." Reverend Thornton, a kindly older man with a shock of white hair, welcomed them warmly. The ceremony was simple and brief, the traditional words echoing in the small church. When Zachariah slid a gold band onto her finger, his mother's, he told her earlier his hands were steady, but Willow could see the emotion in his eyes. "I now pronounce you man and wife," Reverend Thornton declared. "Mr. Donovan, you may kiss your bride." Zachariah hesitated just a moment, then leaned down to brush his lips against hers in a kiss that was gentle but not without warmth. It was over quickly, but it left Willow's cheeks flushed and her heart racing. There was a small reception at the town's hotel afterward, with cake and punch and many congratulations from people Willow had never met, but who seemed genuinely happy for Zachariah. She was touched by the community's obvious fondness for her new husband and their acceptance of her. Late in the afternoon, they began the journey home to her new home, Willow reminded herself. The air between them felt different now, charged with awareness and a new kind of anticipation. "Are you happy?" Zachariah asked suddenly, breaking the companionable silence that had fallen between them. Willow considered the question seriously. "Yes," she said finally. "I think I am. It's all happened very quickly, but yes, I'm happy." He smiled, relief evident in his expression. "Good. That's good." When they arrived back at the ranch, the sun was beginning to set. Maggie had prepared a special supper for them, but had tactfully left it warming on the stove before departing for her own cottage. They ate at the large dining table, making conversation about the day and the people they'd met, both carefully avoiding the topic of what would come next. When they finished, Zachariah cleared his throat. "You must be tired," he said. "If you'd like to retire, I understand." The consideration in his voice, the lack of pressure, decided Willow. "Actually, I thought we might sit in the parlor for a while. If you'd like." His smile was answer enough. They moved to the comfortable room with its well-worn leather chairs and shelves of books. Zachariah poured them each a small glass of whiskey to celebrate. He explained, and they sat before the fire he'd built. "Tell me more about your family," Willow said, sipping the fiery liquid cautiously. "Your letters mentioned that your father came for gold, but little else." Zachariah settled back in his chair, his face relaxed in the firelight. He was from Tennessee originally. Never talked much about his life before California. "I think there might have been trouble, the law, or maybe a woman." He wasn't the type to dwell on the past. "And he met your mother in Virginia City?" "Yes, she'd come out to teach school. She was educated, refined, completely wrong for a rough man like my father, according to everyone. But they suited each other." His smile was fond at the memory. She softened his edges, and he taught her to be strong. "They built this place together, every board and nail." "They sound wonderful," Willow said sincerely. "They were. They gave me a good example of what a marriage could be." He looked at her directly. "I want that for us, Willow. A true partnership. I know this wasn't your first choice of life. Don't say that." She interrupted gently. "You don't know what my first choice would have been. Perhaps this is exactly where I'm meant to be." Something in her words seemed to touch him deeply. He reached across the space between their chairs to take her hand. His palm was warm and calloused against her smooth skin. "I want you to be happy here," he said, his voice low and intense. "I'll do everything in my power to make that happen." Willow's heart quickened at the sincerity in his voice. "I believe you will." They sat in silence for a moment, hands still joined, the crackling of the fire the only sound. Then Zachariah stood, gently pulling her to her feet. "It's been a long day," he said softly. "Perhaps we should retire." Upstairs, Willow changed into her nightdress with trembling fingers, her nervousness returning. But when Zachariah came to her to their room, his approach was as gentle as everything else about him had been. "We have time," he assured her, seeing her anxiety. "All the time we need." His kiss was tentative at first, then deeper as she responded. And in the quiet darkness of the ranch house, Willow discovered that becoming Zachariah's wife in every sense was not something to fear, but to welcome. The weeks that followed settled into a rhythm that surprised Willow with its rightness. Each day brought new discoveries about the ranch, about the West, about herself, and especially about Zachariah. She learned that he was a man of few words but deep feelings, that he valued honesty above all else, that he could be stubborn but never cruel. True to his word, he began teaching her to ride. She took to it more naturally than either of them had expected, soon graduating from sedate walks around the corral on Daisy to proper rides across the ranch. There was a freedom in the movement, in the connection with the horse beneath her, that Willow had never experienced before. She also began to take on the duties of the ranch mistress. Maggie was an invaluable guide, showing her how to manage the household accounts, how to plan meals for the varying number of workers, how to make do when supplies ran short. "You're a quick study," Maggie observed one afternoon as they preserved vegetables from the kitchen garden. "Zach chose well." "I'm not sure how much choice was involved," Willow laughed. "He placed an advertisement, and I answered it." "Oh, there's always choice," Maggie said wisely. "He could have chosen any of the women who wrote to him, and there were plenty, make no mistake. But he chose you." The thought warmed Willow. She had seen the stack of letters Zachariah kept in his desk drawer, responses to his advertisement that he'd received before hers. He'd shown them to her one evening, explaining that none had felt right until her letter arrived. "You wrote like a real person," he'd told her. "Not like someone trying to impress me or sell themselves. Just honest and straightforward. I like that." Their nights together had grown increasingly tender as they learned each other's bodies and desires. Zachariah was a considerate lover, always ensuring her pleasure before his own. Sometimes, in the quiet afterward, he would tell her stories of his childhood on the ranch, or she would describe her life in Philadelphia. These intimate conversations, perhaps even more than their physical connection, were weaving them together into a true marriage. One evening, about 2 months after the wedding, they sat on the porch watching a spectacular sunset paint the western sky in shades of orange and purple. Zachariah's arm was around her shoulders, her head resting comfortably against him. "Are you happy here, truly?" he asked, echoing the question from their wedding day. Willow didn't hesitate. "Yes, more than I thought possible." She felt his chest rise and fall with a deep breath. When you stepped off that train in tears, I thought I'd made a terrible mistake. That I'd brought you to a place you could never love. I was afraid, she admitted. Terrified, really. But when you said those words that I was safe, that I was home, that I was yours, something inside me settled. As if I'd been waiting to hear exactly that all my life. He tightened his arm around her. I meant them. From the moment I saw you, I knew you belonged here. With me. I do belong here, she agreed, lifting her face to his. This is my home now. You are my home. His kiss was gentle at first, then deepened with a hunger that still surprised her. When they drew apart, his eyes were dark with desire. Mrs. Donovan, he murmured, I believe we should retire early tonight. Willow laughed, the sound free and happy in the gathering dusk. I believe you're right, Mr. Donovan. Life wasn't perfect, of course. There were arguments about money, about risks Zachariah took in his work, about Willow's desire to visit her sisters. There was a particularly difficult winter when blizzards threatened the herd and everyone worked to the point of exhaustion. There was the time Willow fell from her horse and broke her arm, causing Zachariah to hover anxiously until she was fully healed. But there were also countless moments of joy. The morning Willow confirmed she was expecting their first child, the wonder in Zachariah's eyes making her fall in love with him all over again. The birth of their son, William Zachariah Donovan, who had his father's green eyes and his mother's determined spirit. The day Zachariah surprised Willow with a piano for the parlor, remembering her mention of music lessons as a girl. As the years passed, the Diamond D prospered. Zachariah's careful management and willingness to adopt new methods made the ranch one of the most successful in Nevada. They added more land, more cattle, more hands. But the heart of the operation remained the same, the house by the lake, where Willow had created a true home. They had 3 more children after William, twin girls, Eleanor and Elizabeth, and another son, James. The house that had once seemed too large for one man now rang with children's laughter, just as Maggie had predicted. Willow never regretted her decision to answer that advertisement, to travel west to marry a stranger. For in Zachariah, she had found not just security or respectability, but a love deeper and truer than she had ever imagined possible. And in the wild beauty of Nevada, in the life they built together at the Diamond D, she had found herself. 10 years to the day after their wedding, Zachariah surprised her with a trip back east to visit her sisters. As they stood on the platform of Carson City's now expanded train station, waiting to board, Willow was struck by how different everything was from that first arrival. Remember when I stepped off the train right here? She asked, squeezing Zachariah's hand. I was terrified and crying. He nodded, his eyes warm with memory. And I was late because that blasted horse threw a shoe. But you came, and you said that you were safe, you were home, you were mine. He finished, pulling her close. The truest words I ever spoke. She leaned up to kiss him, not caring who might see. And I am. Safe, home, and yours. Always. As the train whistle blew, signaling it was time to board, Willow looked back one last time at the town that had become her home, at the mountains that cradled the ranch where her children waited with Maggie. 10 years ago, she had arrived a stranger in a strange land, stepping off the train in tears. Now she left as a woman confident in her place in the world, secure in the knowledge that no matter where she went, her true home, Zachariah's love, would always be with her. And that, she knew with absolute certainty, was worth every tear, every fear, every moment of doubt. For in the vast and beautiful wilderness of Nevada, in the arms of a quiet cowboy who had promised her safety and home, Willow Anderson Donovan had found not just survival, but the kind of happiness she had never dared to dream of.